Spotlight, lectures and performances on and around Albany State University.
Es un placer presentarles a la doctora White Ingold. Good morning. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. White Ingold. Dr. Ingold received both her master's degree in Romance Linguistics and her PhD in French from the University of Virginia. She comes to us from the National Foreign Language Center, also known as NFLC, at the University of Maryland and currently holds the position of Executive Director. Dr. Ingold joined the NFLC in 1996 after a varied career in higher learning and education that includes service as a foreign language department chair, Dean of Arts and Sciences, and Provost at Gallaudet University, and as President of the American University of Paris. Currently, she serves as the Principal Investigator for the Analysis and Language Learning, the ALL contract, which was formerly LangNet, the NFLC's federally funded project to develop e-learning at high levels of proficiency in critical languages. She is also the Principal Investigator of Star Talk project, which sponsors summer programs for teachers and learners of critical languages in more than 40 states. In addition to her leadership role, Dr. Ingold's other interests include U.S. language policy, heritage language development, education of translators and interpreters, and support of language access under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. Her languages, in descending order of proficiency, are English, French, Spanish, American Sign Language, German, Italian, and Portuguese. We are so fortunate to have her here with us this morning. So please join me in welcoming Dr. White Ingold.
It's a real pleasure to be here and to get to know your university and to get to know some of your faculty whom I met last night and your programs. I am so pleased that you are starting to teach the languages that are emerging as so critically important in our century. The United States interacts with just about every nation on earth. There are very few places where the United States doesn't have a relationship or an interest. And that means that instead of, as when I was coming up, we thought we just needed the European languages. We need them all. And we need people who speak them and who understand those cultures, who can deal with people on a human level and a professional level, and we don't have enough. So I'm here in part on a recruiting mission, and I'll be very upfront about it. I want you guys to learn languages, and I want you to use your languages in your careers and your jobs, and if not formally, in your communities that are increasingly diverse. So right now, and I'm in my last year as president of an organization that the National Foreign Language Center helped to found, the National Council for the Teaching of Critical Languages, the National Council for the Teaching of Less Commonly Taught Languages is the official title. And a predecessor at the National Foreign Language Center turned that acronym into Nickel-Tickle. And Nickel-Tickle it has been ever since, despite everybody's efforts to do something. You know, we need to sound more serious. It has a conference coming up at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and there you will see the United Nations. And it's been a real pleasure for me, having learned, except for American Sign Language, commonly taught European languages, to have gotten to know that world better, and to especially to get to know some of the faculty that teach those languages. I'm very privileged to be the executive director of our center, and I want to tell you a little bit about what it's like to be there, because I think we're sort of a microcosm of the way many organizations will soon be if they're not already. We have about 100 people now. We've grown with these two large projects we have. Our folks have a range of skills, including advanced internet applications and authoring tools, more than a dozen languages, among them instructional design, second language acquisition. Probably a quarter of them, I'd have to go through the list and count, were born outside the United States. We're fortunate that Maryland is a state with lots of immigrants. We did a survey and we found more than 150 languages spoken in the state of Maryland. That's in one state, 150. And I can guarantee you that some of those languages you've never even heard of. Our immigrant population is a very important source of language expertise for us. A huge number of the employees who work in language-intensive jobs in the government are immigrants, because we don't grow our own yet. We hope to. And more than that, these immigrants' children, because they can't get language arts in their home language, are not likely to have those skills in the next generation. So we really do need to improve our act. We need to teach the languages of the world. We need to teach them more effectively so people can really use them. And I mean, the number of times that I introduce myself as a French teacher and someone says, "Oh, I had 2 years of French in high school and I can't speak a word of it." And you sort of want to, I don't know what you want to do, but you crawl under the desk or something. But there are so many good opportunities to learn language as well. We've got the internet. You can be chatting with people in pretty much any country in the world. And one of our missions at NFLC is to get those methodologies out there that work, so people will be saying, "Oh, I studied French, or I studied Tagalog, or I studied Urdu, and I still hang out with some people on the internet, and I still read an Urdu newspaper from time to time." That's what or maybe it led to a career in the Foreign Service. That's what I want to be hearing. But NFLC is, at NFLC, it's been really other than living in France, it's been my real introduction to an international work environment. When we have potlucks, we have some of the best potluck lunches you can imagine. But we've also had to train ourselves. We always list our ingredients, because we've got Muslims, and we've got Hindus, and we've got probably every other thing you can think of, and we have dietary restrictions. I was talking to one of my project managers the other day, and we were talking about kids, and I said, "Well, you're going to get your kids a dog?" And he said, "Get them a dog." He said, "I'm a Muslim. Dogs are haram." Dogs are forbidden. They're not clean. He said, "We can have cats. The Prophet loved cats." Oh, I didn't know that. But you're always coming up with these different ways of looking at the world, and the different ways people grew up, and the different ways they think about everyday things as well as big picture things like world peace. So we really have a good time. And my husband and I went to Turkey year before last, and we visited mosques. We had friends there who took us around to some of the mosques that aren't on the tourist route. And the first time we went into a mosque, 20, 30 years ago, when I went into a mosque, I would find something to put over my head, and just to be polite and everything. Well, after working at NFLC for a few years, I whipped out my scarf and I went like this, and my husband looked around at me and he was just utterly shocked because he saw a Muslim woman. You know, I mean, it wasn't just me with my scarf draped over my head. I had done it right. So I said, I know how to tie a hijab. I work at the National Foreign Language Center, and it just, but these everyday things that can push you apart if you don't embrace them can also pull you together. And where does my colleague get all these gorgeous, she wears the long dresses and everything. Where does she get all these gorgeous clothes? And she has a sister in Jeddah who shops for her. So there are, find me women who don't talk about clothes. But you can talk about clothes with the person next door, or you can talk about clothes from somebody who dresses with a whole different set of rules, but no less a sense of style. So that's life in the National Foreign Language Center, and it's the workforce of the future, because people move in this world. We're a plane ride away. We are sometimes the fares can get very cheap. That's always an obstacle. And what I want to tell you about is that there are more and more opportunities to move about, to work in different countries as part perhaps of an American corporation, to travel for pleasure, but to be part of international relief organizations that are the NGOs that are such a huge part of how we get human relief work done in this world. People who have built lifetime careers working for an NGO have not only fascinating jobs, but they really do good work. But languages have to be a part of that. So if I could ask you to do one thing, it's sign up for a language class. How many of you are taking a foreign language currently or have taken one in the last few years? I see some hands. Good. That's good. The rest of you, won't be too long until it's time to sign up for courses for next semester. Go there. There are good reasons to study a language. There is solid evidence now that it makes you smarter. It gives you stronger working memory. It improves your problem-solving ability. And it makes it easier for you to learn additional languages. It's not an accident that the people who know one foreign language well often know a second, a third, or fourth. It makes it easier. Language learning is a skill, just like if you're a good football player, you'll learn to play soccer more easily or whatever. Those skills transfer from language to language, just like they transfer from sport to sport or job to job. And as you get older, you aren't thinking about that right now, but it helps to ward off Alzheimer's. That reason's getting more important to me as time goes on. Let me tell you about, I promised Dr. Hill I would tell you about the Star Talk program. We run a national program. It's called Star Talk because the language person at the National Security Agency who thought it up was a Star Trek fan. So that's how it's called Star Talk. It's a national program that provides summer learning opportunities for students and teachers of critical languages. And the languages are Arabic, which you teach here, Chinese, Hindi, Urdu, Persian, Dari, which is a variant of Persian, Turkish, Russian, Swahili, and Portuguese. these languages are all very big, very critical to international affairs. Unfortunately, you can't study Persian in Iran now because of the political situation, but I hope one day to see Isfahan again, and that our relationships will be such that we can travel there. There are a lot of Iranians who live in the United States, and those are our sources of Persian teachers for the most part. So we have those languages. All of them are, some of them are, if you know Spanish, Portuguese is an easy next language. I've never formally studied Portuguese, but I did learn that when I'm listening to a lecture in Portuguese with an interpreter, halfway through the lecture, I can stop listening to the interpreter. It just works. And the same is true with Italian. You know, the Romance languages, especially if you've been able to take a couple of years of Latin, are so interconnected that it's sort of you buy one, get one free. So if you have Spanish, sign up for a Portuguese program. If you're taking Arabic, or try a completely new language. This past summer, there were Star Talk programs in every state except 2. This summer, we expect to have programs in every state except North Dakota. I don't know what we're going to do about North Dakota. We have tried. You know, but and it's just, you know, darn it, we want to have all 50. It's very, very disturbing. But there are usually programs in Georgia. We haven't announced this year's awardees, so I can't say what there's going to be. But also, many of these programs are residential, and they pull students from everywhere. Some of them charge tuition, some are free. And the ones that charge tuition often have need-based financial aid. So they really are worth looking at, and they are a big, we get wonderful feedback from students and teachers about how interesting, how exciting, how successful they were in language learning. And we are, one of the best things I think we're doing is really adding to the base of teachers of these languages who have strong methodology and can really help learners be successful. So I'll be getting the relevant URLs to Dr. Hill to make sure that you can find your way to all that information. I also want to draw your attention to a number of scholarship opportunities for study abroad and for graduate work in languages that you may not know about. They fall under the general heading of the National Security Education Program and the National Security Language Initiative. And if you Google either one of those, you'll get a whole list of links. Some of them are very generous. A lot fewer people know about them than we would like to know about them. They all have websites that explain who's eligible. But I myself went to graduate school under an NDEA fellowship, as Dr. Hill did, and those are still around, and they're still paying for graduate school. And we need, and I'm just gonna make the straight pitch to you. We need more African Americans in these programs and in our government international work. It's an underrepresented group, and I am tired of every time I turn on the TV and see some international discussion going on, the Americans looking like this was a country that's all European. We aren't. We aren't. We are one of the most diverse countries on the face of the earth. Maryland is the future. 150 different languages, every ethnicity you can imagine. We need our government workforce to represent the country they live in. And the only way we can do that is if you'll step up and at least entertain the notion of a career in government, especially in the agencies that look out and interact with the rest of the world. And it's quite honestly, I work a lot with the intelligence agencies. I don't apologize for that. I mean, some people think they're creepy, but we need to understand the rest of the world. Several of the agencies have language training programs on their own. A huge language effort is going on in the U.S. military. I just got back last week from a trip to the Defense Language Institute that trains many hundreds of students every year in, I think they've got 16 different language going now, to play roles like foreign area officers. That work is very important because everywhere we go, if you think about the places we're engaged in the world, we're engaged with the local people and we're engaged with the local governments, and often we're working in a coalition with other governments. So we need to be able to communicate. We need to have people who can build those bridges, so we won't have to fight wars, so we can solve problems before we start shooting at each other. Wars are not getting better. They're getting nastier and nastier because we have more and more ability to do harm. And internationally trained and culturally sensitive and linguistically competent Americans are part of the solution to those problems. I wanted to tell you too a little bit about some of the work we're doing in cross-cultural communication. We have an agency, a multi-agency group, and our organization has 3 people on the committee. We're not a government agency, but often people sort of mistake us for one. So we get to play in some interesting projects. But government is trying to describe and measure and teach better intercultural competency. I'll just give you a few examples of the things that includes besides just learning the language. For example, if you're a man, do you make eye contact with a woman outside your family? My Pakistani colleague still doesn't. You know, when I first started working with him, you know, I would be, in the United States you make eye contact, and we were sort of doing this dance where I'd look him in the eye and he'd look away, and I'd look him in the eye, and finally it dawned on me when he said, we were talking about the Pashtun tribe that he's a member of, and it's fairly known as a fairly warlike tribe, and we were talking about learning Pashto, which is one of the languages we push the teaching of, and he said, oh, well, you know, we're more likely to shoot you for looking at our women than for not speaking our language. Took me back a step. but the light bulb went off, and I said, okay, that's why he won't make eye contact. So we talk about everything, but we talk, you know, we don't look each other in the eye, and I've adjusted to that because that's a very deep-seated value in his culture. So when you meet somebody in culture A, who speaks first? The guest or the invitee, the senior person or the more junior person? What's the appropriate greeting for an elder person, a higher ranking official, or a child? If you're invited to a meal, and this is a real challenge in Arabic-speaking countries, how can you know if the invitation is a polite formality or if it's sincerely meant? How many times are you supposed to say, oh, no, thank you, you're too kind, before you say yes? And if you say yes too soon, he goes on and says, oh, that silly American, we're having them over for dinner, because I was just saying, oh, you have to come over for a meal, and they said, what time? you know, what gestures are considered very offensive in the society. You can give horrible offense without realizing it just by making a hand gesture or using the wrong hand to do something with. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to turn people off before you even met them, and you don't want them to think that we Americans don't know how to deal with the rest of the world. Dress, attire. We've already talked about how much, for women, how much they cover, what colors they can wear. In some Arabic-speaking countries, any color. You see people in Turkey, or in Turkey, which is a Muslim country, the teenagers wear Gucci headscarves and incredibly tight jeans. And I'm thinking now, what kind of Islam is this? And then in other countries, you've got the full attire, and it's loose, and it's the sleeves, and so just like we have all variations of Christian practice. How many Christian denominations do we have in this country? I mean, and they all have a little bit different take on things. The Muslim world is similarly diverse, and I'm fairly sure, I don't talk with my Hindu colleagues about these things as often, but there's a huge diversity of practice there too. So it's really brought this whole project, working at NFLC and working with all these people from other language groups, it's really brought home to me the importance of taking time to observe and to ask and to learn, and taking an interest. And I really wish for each of you abundant opportunities to travel, but also, even if you're not traveling, to meet in this country and to interact with and to learn from the people who represent this amazing, amazing world we live in. And it's a world that's shrinking and coming to us all the time. It's an exciting time to be alive on this particular planet. And I hope that you will avail yourself of these opportunities to know people and enjoy people and interact with people from all these different countries and cultures and ways of living and thinking about life and friendship and child raising and all those good things. So with that, I'm going to stop and throw it open for comments and questions and shouts of disagreement or whatever. The question was, in Star Talk we teach Chinese. Which Chinese do we teach? And we teach Mandarin. The question was whether I spoke any of those languages that I now speak before I got my master's. And you remind me that I wanted to talk about the opportunity to learn languages. The United States is the only industrialized nation that doesn't require students to learn a language in the course of getting a high school diploma. The only one. The EU's going for three foreign languages now. Everybody pretty much in the EU studies at least two. But I had the opportunity in my high school. I grew up in South Carolina, in a town of 10,000 people, and I had 2 years of Latin. And there was either going to be 2 years of French or 2 years of Spanish, depending on who they had at the time, and I had 2 years of French. So I started, I continued my French in college. I majored in French in undergrad. I added German, so I can speak very bad German. There's so many opportunities to make mistakes in German. It's like they planned it. But just so they can feel superior. Ah, you didn't put the right ending on that adjective. But then I added Spanish, really my senior year in college, because I was going to graduate school at UVA, and you had to present a second Romance language. So I then took more Spanish in graduate school, and Italian and Portuguese I've never formally studied, but I have read an entire book in Italian, so my Italian really does work, at least for listening. American Sign Language, that was a condition of becoming a faculty member at Gallaudet. You had to learn sign language because that's what you teach your classes in. And I thought, I have died and gone to heaven. Somebody's going to give me a job and pay me to learn a language. So and sign language has all kinds of advantages. You can talk across huge differences. You can sign really big like this, and people can see you at the other end of the football field. So and it's also used in Nigeria. Sign languages are not, there's a different sign language in France. I took some deaf students on a study abroad program, and we met some French deaf kids in the metro, and we couldn't communicate with them. We ended up passing notes back and forth in French because the sign languages aren't the same. But in Nigeria, because many Nigerian educators of the deaf came to Gallaudet to study, they took American Sign Language back to Nigeria. So if you go to Nigeria and you don't know the local language and you're working with deaf students, you can still communicate. So that's my history of language learning. The study abroad, the question was about study abroad programs, and I'm sorry that I didn't bring more exact information, but one is at the State Department. It's called NSLY, N-S-L-Y, which is National Security Language Initiative, Y for Youth, and it offers study abroad, funded study abroad programs. Also the National Security Education Program, and there are several other programs under the Department of Education, and I will apologize I didn't bring more specifics, but I will get those to Dr. Hill so he can get them out to you. Okay, the good questions about qualifications. What are the qualifications and what's the duration of the programs? They vary widely. Many of them are introductory, so essentially you don't have to already have a certain level in the language. They're getting you started. They're trying to get you interested, get you hooked on the language, so you'll go ahead and study it. The duration can be, some of the teacher training programs are just a week. They're essentially a workshop. Most of the language programs for students are 3 weeks. Some of them are longer, some of them are 6 weeks. There are a few that carry credit, even college credit. So that's a possibility. But they are, and they range in intensivity from, full school day, 5 days a week, to a few hours a day. And some of them are actually residential, and they're immersion even on the weekends. They have people living in the dorms who speak the languages, so you take a language pledge. So it's quite a variety, and so you'll have to sort of look at, you can search on the StarTalk website by the language you want, by the geographic area, and so you can check them all out, or check the ones out that meet your criteria and find out what would work for you. The biggest group is for high school, but there are college programs, and if you've got little kids you want to get started off early, there are some for younger children too. The applications, pretty much as soon as we notify the programs that they've been funded, and a number of them will be will already have had programs for several years, they'll get those up on their website. So keep watching the StarTalk. The StarTalk website will announce when the new programs are up, and then you just start looking, and then as soon as you find a program you're interested in, go ahead and fill out the forms. They have different deadlines. Some of them fill up quickly because people know about them and are waiting for them. Others, in some areas, have trouble making their enrollment targets, and so admission would be open until almost the program starts, probably. So there's a wide variation.
So they typically stay a year ahead, a year in advance?
No, unfortunately, unfortunately, the Star Talk, we hope when they refund it, and I hope they will, that they'll change some of the rules, because we can't fund programs for multiple years. So every year, every program has to reapply, and so we can't tell you who's going to have a program until, a couple of months before they actually start. So it's just the way this program works. Yes?
Do you know why they don't have Spanish?
They don't have Spanish because Spanish in the United States is not in short supply. In other words, they can find educated native speakers of Spanish, or Spanish is the most widely taught foreign language in the United States. So that's why. That doesn't mean that the government doesn't hire lots and lots of Spanish speakers. Let me mention another use of world languages that I haven't mentioned, and it's a bad oversight on my part. I mentioned, the person who introduced me mentioned my interest in the language access under the Civil Rights Act. If you are a recent immigrant who doesn't speak English and you need to go to the hospital, you have the right to an interpreter. If you get arrested, you have the right to an interpreter. If you're in a court case, you have the right to an interpreter. That right is, like some other things, honored in the breach. It's often the case that there's not an interpreter that's qualified for that circumstance, and as a result, people's limited English proficiency, people's civil rights are violated on a routine basis. So one of the things I've been working on at the University of Maryland is to create a training program for interpreters and translators. And there is a huge need for English, Spanish interpreters. If you want to do the Lord's work, helping somebody get proper medical care, helping somebody win a court case that they should win, or not go to jail when they don't deserve to go to jail, that's good work. And we have almost an unlimited number of slots out there. For local governments need them, state governments need them, hospitals need them. When I go into Alexandria Hospital or Arlington Hospital, they have a huge list of languages. So if you come in, you can point to your language and they'll get you an interpreter, often through a national telephone service. But as you know, that's not ideal. You'd love to have somebody right there with you. But that's Language Line Services employs many, many thousands of interpreters who work telephonically, because the need is huge. With all these languages, all these people, and as I was saying last night, a real crisis in English as a second language education. The community colleges have waiting lists, huge waiting lists for ESL. ESL programs in public schools vary very widely in quality, and way too many of our immigrant families don't have the opportunity to learn the language. You come here to better your family, or you come here as an individual and you've got a family back in Mexico or whatever, and you're working 2 minimum wage jobs and sending the money home. How are you going to learn English? It's a huge challenge for that community, and it's one of the biggest civil rights issues of our time today. And I would love to see some of you get those language skills up there and engage in that very fine work.
Dr. Ingold, we would like to express our appreciation to you for coming and interacting with us. We know you have a busy schedule, but I sincerely appreciate your coming to visit us and to spend some days with us. Thank you very much.
It's been a privilege.